All. This is Dr. Mobeen Sayed from Drbeen.com. Welcome to one more show. So this morning we had Dr. Paul Merrick with us. Now we have Steve Kirsch with us, another rock star, somebody who has been very passionately and very actively has been working for COVID early treatment. This early and aggressive treatment is something that is my voice as well. And I have been calling out for early and aggressive treatment for a long time. So today we have a person who stands behind that, and not only just stands behind it, actively works for it. So Steve, welcome. I'm quickly going to show your site and then bring the mic to you. So Cool Beans, here is, so as customary, this is Drbeen.com, and here is Steve's site. So this is treatearly.org, and here you can see Steve. So Steve is a serial entrepreneur, very passionate for early aggressive treatment for COVID, has been looking at various drugs and their impact on the early treatment and safety of the patient. He has actually handed over, so if you go through this page, he has handed over his business to his co-founder and dedicated his time and I believe lots of funds as well to this cause. So Steve, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Excellent. So Steve, the format is that we have Cool Beans here as well. Most of our guests that join us, we have titles for them. And I was looking at the commentary before you and I went live, and the Cool Beans here were nominating Passionate Bean for you in recognition of your work. So are you comfortable being a passionate bean?
Sure.
Excellent. So
I've been called worse.
So passionate in a positive way, not in a negative way.
Yeah.
So once again, thank you very much for your work. I have heard, I'm going to start right from here. I've heard that you had raised 6 million, including $1 million from your own side as well, to help with this work. Can you tell us a little bit about that, your work? What have you done so far? The funds, progress, where are you at?
Sure. I took a kind of a leave of absence from my company to pursue this because I thought that there was an opportunity to help to end the COVID pandemic sooner than other options. And I was talking to scientists, and they were saying that early treatment is the fastest, safest, and the least cost way to end the pandemic. And so what I did is I put in $1 million of my own money. I raised $5 million from other people and assembled a group of scientists to evaluate grant proposals. And we essentially opened up a website and allowed people to submit grant applications. And we evaluated them and funded 14 of the best ones there.
Got it. And what is the current status? How far are you? What have you found?
Well, the drug that's been the most successful for us is one of the first ones that we funded, and that's fluvoxamine. And we funded the phase 2 trial for fluvoxamine, and there we had a 100% success rate in keeping people essentially out of the hospital. It was a clinical endpoint called I think it was clinical deterioration, where if your SpO2 dropped below a certain level, or you had trouble breathing, essentially a hospitalization criteria, then that was the clinical endpoint that they defined. And what they found is that if they gave fluvoxamine early enough to a patient, and in this case, they got them there very early because it was a local trial, then they were able to save all of the people who got fluvoxamine from having to be hospitalized, whereas 8.3% of the placebo group was hospitalized. So 8.3% hospitalized versus 0, right? So that's a 100% reduction. And so that was a very significant result. It had a very strong p-value, so very statistically significant. And it was published in JAMA, And then the JAMA editors wrote, well, of course, no doctor should ever try this on a patient until it's confirmed in a large phase 3 trial. And I was on a Zoom webinar with Dr. David Seftel, and I was talking about the JAMA paper, and it turns out that Dr. Seftel happened to be the track physician at Golden Gate Fields. And it turned out that Golden Gate Fields had an outbreak of COVID, a mass outbreak on the same day. So Dr. Seftel decided to see if what I was saying was true. He looked at the study. He was convinced that the study was made sense because the mechanism of action, and also because of the trial results, were very convincing. And also, there's a lot of supporting data where you couldn't really find a study that showed that fluvoxamine wouldn't be effective, or would suggest that fluvoxamine wouldn't be effective. So he decided to offer the patients, hey, you can either have the fluvoxamine or you can have the nothing, right, which is the standard of care. And only about 30% of the track workers chose the fluvoxamine because, you know, it's an untested thing. And usually the people who are the healthiest said, I'm healthy, I don't need the drug. Now, the people who are in not so good of a shape said, this doesn't look too good, let me opt for the drug. So what you have here is an interesting case because the people who were sicker were more likely to take the drug. So if we got 100% success in that group, that would be really impressive. That would be better than random, because random, you would have, you know, randomized.
Absolutely.
Here it's like, you know,
yeah, you're picking up
behind your back.
Yeah, you're picking up a group which already is at risk. And so is that, do we have some results from that? Or
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So tell us.
So that was published in OFID. I forget what it's, the Open Forum for Infectious Disease. And it was an editor's choice, just like it was in JAMA. That paper from Washington University was an editor's choice in JAMA. And this one was an editor's choice in Open Forum Infectious Disease. And it showed that of the 77 people who got fluvoxamine, none of them were hospitalized. None of them even got close to hospitalization, which is really significant. And you can't see that from the paper. You know, people who read the papers and say, well, I'm just going to look at the paper. Well, you know, I got to talk to the physician who talked to the patients. And we know that when people got the drug early, they basically had a really nice time with the virus. It was less than a cold. And the number one complaint, and this of course isn't in the paper, but the number one complaint is, I want to get back to work. Why can't I get back to work? I feel fine.
And why is this not, I mean, yes, it is a complaint.
Because you can't put that in a
scientific paper.
It's not scientific.
Like, why can't I get back to the work is not scientific, of course.
Yeah. So the other thing you couldn't put in the paper is that when it started, 30% opted for the drug. 2 weeks later, when people could see, oh, the people that opted for the drug, they're like all happy and, you know, wanting to get back to work. And the people who didn't opt for the drug are all like in bed and feeling shitty and all that. And so the people it shifted from like a 30% take rate to 100% take rate. In fact, people were coming into Dr. Seftel's office saying, I want the drug. I want fluvoxamine. You know, I've got COVID, I want fluvoxamine. Whereas before it was like, I got COVID, I'm sick, right? So this is a dramatic shift. Now, though it wasn't because David Seftel was convincing at all, right? Because he's the trusted doctor and only 30% of the people trusted him. But somehow there was a massive opinion shift from 30% to now 100%. Now, that doesn't happen. Like, people don't change their minds. So what caused the shift? Do you know?
Yeah, of course. Fluvoxamine.
Well, no, it wasn't fluvoxamine. It's a close-knit community.
So they were talking with each other and saying, hey, I'm feeling great.
Yeah, they could see. Yeah. They could see what happened to the two groups? It's like, looking at two groups, right? And one is like up here and the other one is down there. Like, which group do you want to be in? And so because the patients themselves could see the difference in everyone who took the drug versus, it was a no-brainer to them.
So tell me this, sorry for the interruption.
Yeah.
I want to give you this to complete your thought. However, I have a question here. Of course, you are not an MD, but you have a team of folks who are helping you. What in fluvoxamine is the mechanism? What is helping? What is helping this good in the early stage?
Yeah. So when you're treating this this virus, you're typically treating it in the inflammatory stage. You're not treating it in the virus replication stage because that's already happened, right? By the time you get symptoms, it's pretty much too late for an antiviral. And, but of course the FDA is investing, $2 billion in an antiviral that's never been proven. But the point of this is when you give an antiviral, you want to give it really early before the replication happens. And usually by the time you have symptoms, it's way too late. And people only realize they have COVID when they have symptoms. So attacking this with an antiviral would be great, but you probably are not going to get it there fast enough. And so all of these drugs like fluvoxamine are treating this inflammatory stage where the virus is replicated and now it's creating this inflammation and clotting throughout your body, including inside your brain. And so fluvoxamine is like a glass of water on the inflammatory phase of the fire. And so that's why it works so well, is it calms down the inflammation because it activates the sigma-1 receptor. And fluvoxamine, of all of the SSRIs, fluvoxamine activates sigma-1, which then reduces, it's like a kill switch, essentially, for inflammation. And the other interesting and really important point is that kill switch also, or fluvoxamine is designed to go into your brain, to pass through the blood-brain barrier. And so it can kill inflammation in your brain, which is super important, which is something that other drugs like ivermectin can't, because it doesn't pass through the blood-brain barrier. And so this is why fluvoxamine is super important for getting rid of brain fog and all this. So when people who have COVID and they start taking fluvoxamine, and typically 50 milligrams twice a day is what Seftel used in his trial, they found that the brain fog went away.
And this is a very important point. I want to make sure that the cool beans who are listening to this, we have talked about fluvoxamine in our talks as well. If you go back a few videos a few months ago, we talked about fluvoxamine, we talked about sigma-1. And I want to piggyback on your comment here, because many times I have heard from cool beans or when they share a video, then some doctor would reach out and say, well, fluvoxamine is used for, let's say, obsessive compulsive disorder or some psychiatric help. Why are you giving fluvoxamine? Do you think that people are going insane and you're not able to understand that this may be inflammation? And it is important to note that fluvoxamine, number one, crosses blood-brain barrier compared to ivermectin, which does not in normal healthy people. And number two, fluvoxamine is sigma-1 agonist, which reduces the inflammation. So a question for you, Steve. In your this regime or protocol that you were working with your team, did you combine ivermectin as well as a partner to fluvoxamine, or it was purely fluvoxamine? What was the structure of the management?
Well, in the Seftel trial, it was just fluvoxamine. It was just a single drug, because we wanted to find out whether it was the fluvoxamine had an effect. And so it has a very large effect size if it is given early, and that's the key. So there's a phase 3 trial result of fluvoxamine that's going to come out, and they gave it late because they had a FedEx it to the recipient the person who enrolled in the trial. They have FedEx it. FedEx adds 1 day, 2 days, 3 days to when they can start. And let me tell you that adding 1 day can make a world of difference. It could be the difference between 100% effective drug versus one that's 30% effective.
I totally agree with you. And I wanted to ask you this question, though. You are much more connected, you're much more aware of the political parts of it, or maybe economic parts of it. The question that I have is, and this is a question that I think about, why are these studies being done in a way that the drug would actually end up, you can look at the study and say, this study is not going to produce any positive result, or maybe it would produce negative results.
Yeah.
Is this really, are people, the ones who are doing the trials, they are so corrupt? Is it ignorance? What is it? What is your understanding?
Well, it's hard to ascribe motivation, and one is always cautioned against trying to, unless they know the people, to ascribe motivations. I mean, there are some people that write papers that are well known. There was an author who shall remain nameless who published a paper, and he was trying to take down ivermectin, and he showed that, oh, look at this study. It just destroys the argument that ivermectin is safe and effective and so forth. And people very quickly pointed out that he had reversed the two groups, that he needed to switch the numbers. So what this guy did is he switched the numbers so that this paper would be correct, but he didn't change the conclusion. Now, that's, there's no way you can hide on that one, right? So we know where this guy stands in terms of interpreting science. It seems like it doesn't matter whether it was 100% effective or it was 100% destructive. Whatever his result is, it didn't change, and so we looked at that and we laughed, and so. But
this is actually a very important thing. For example, with hydroxychloroquine, and I'm going to dare name these companies. I have been naming them, and so far I'm fine, and I think I'll be fine. If they shut it down, then fine, that too. Censorship did the study with hydroxychloroquine, which was a totally incorrect, fraudulent data processing and representation of where the data was, where did it come from, or did they even have the data?
Right, and published in Lancet.
They published it in Lancet. WHO responded to that. WHO said, stop hydroxy. The whole world had the news cycle to say hydroxy is bad. Censorship has told us that. WHO has agreed.
Proves
afterwards,
it. Top journal.
Yep. Afterwards, it was proved that whole thing was a fraud. But the news cycle had occurred. The perception had changed. And when I would talk with my friends all over the world, because they listen to this talk and they'll come and talk with me about
mission accomplished,
they would simply say, when I'd say, hey, use hydroxy, they'll say, did you not hear that WHO says? And not only this, that now they would not use hydroxy, they would actually think that we are now less credible, who are talking about things that WHO and FDA and CDC do not support.
Correct.
This is something, I think about this a lot. I don't think it is just simply ignorance. I think there is a deliberate, there is an intentional damage that is done.
Oh yeah, look, I think there's no question about that. And for example, the NIH and the World Health Organization were informed that both ivermectin and fluvoxamine were going to be confirmed in a large clinical trial, where it was pretty unambiguous that it would meet the required p-values and so forth. Those organizations, I don't know what the WHO does, but I know for sure what NIH does. And NIH is allowed to have expert opinion. So they're allowed to say, well, our expert opinion, even though we only had 2 fluvoxamine trials, now that we have this extra data, which has been shared with us, they could easily have issued an expert opinion that, oh, people should use fluvoxamine. And in fact, I would argue that any doctor, any scientist that is familiar with the precautionary principle, which says that, hey, if you got fluvoxamine and it's in 2 trials, and they were pretty well randomized. In fact, one was quasi-randomized, which is actually better than randomized because the sicker patients got the drug. If you got 2 trials like that, then, and fluvoxamine has been around for 40 years without any fatalities, then why not give it? In the meantime, while you're waiting for that phase 3 trial, the safest thing to do to save the most lives is to give the drug, because there's no, like, why would you not? It's like, hey, if you were drowning and I had a life preserver and it wasn't certified by the U.S. Coast Guard, for use in high water, do you think I should wait or like maybe take a year to test it before I throw it to you? Or do you think I should just throw you the life preserver even though it wasn't tested in high seas?
Yeah. So
that's essentially what the choice is. And the NIH, of course, chooses to say, no, we don't want to take any chances here. After all, nothing could happen. Right?
But I have a comment here. So strengthening your point, there are drugs like bamlanivimab, which were total 470-ish people in the trial. 300 people were actually various dosages of the bamlanivimab. It was a phase 2 trial, and the result was, hey, we are approving it. So how come a drug with lesser number of people, with a smaller comparative group, more of a drug dose exploration, ends up being approved, and things like ivermectin or fluvoxamine are still sitting on a side saying, hey, we look at the magic we can do, and still not getting their voice? What is this?
Well, look, it's called regulatory capture is the term, which essentially means that the regulators are captured by the drug companies. Like, why does Merck issue a statement saying that ivermectin is dangerous, and several months later you get a peer-reviewed meta-analysis and systematic review that says that ivermectin works, that the evidence is low to moderate, but that it's clear that ivermectin works, and it's a peer-reviewed systematic review, which is the top of the evidence-based medicine pyramid. It doesn't get any higher than that. That's like, going to Harvard and getting your MBA from Harvard Business School. It's like you don't get any better than that. And everybody in the world is supposed to respect that in terms of evidence-based medicine. So what happens? As soon as that study is released, you would expect the entire world to say, hallelujah, hallelujah. We now, even though we had these trials that people weren't convinced, because we have a systematic review, and systematic reviews are never overturned or never contradicted or whatever, at least in history up until now, that now we have a contradictory one that says, oh, you shouldn't use ivermectin, which selected studies and then they got published. That's we can talk about that next, but you would have expected that when you have a systematic review published, peer-reviewed, published, that the whole world, that the WHO would issue press release saying, hey, ivermectin works, use it. You would think that the NIH would be blasting out, hey, we're going to change the guidelines, ivermectin works. You would have expected that Gavi, which was advertising that ivermectin doesn't work, you would have expected them to stop advertising. You would have expected YouTube to have changed their policy such that, oh, anybody who says ivermectin doesn't work, they should be banned. And anyone who says ivermectin did work, we should reinstate their videos, we should remonetize their channel, and we should give them back pay for all of the revenue that they would have generated had we not made the mistake. That's what you would have expected to happen.
Yeah, and for the cool beans context here, you're seeing a big smile on my face. The reason for that is 54 of my videos were taken down in one day when they talked about ivermectin. And Steve, full disclosure, again, I have no financial or commercial interest with Steve's work or his organization. However, Steve has volunteered sometimes to help me figure out the censorship issues. Although these videos are still the same, they're still taken down. And and we'll go to censorship in a second. I still want
I
to
tried.
yes, but at least Steve had helped. And it was like a magic that not on the unfortunately Steve thought that he could help us. That didn't happen, but it was a magic that one day 54 videos were just brought down. One day.
Oh, well, think about this. Robert Malone is on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And he's posting material, scientific material, like papers on LinkedIn. His LinkedIn account is canceled. They don't even have the courtesy to notify him in advance. They don't even have the courtesy to notify him after the fact. He finds out that his 10 years of LinkedIn contacts and 10 years of LinkedIn posts are completely gone. It's as if he's wiped off planet Earth. And it was done like that, just like, Thanos in the Avengers, right? In this case, it wasn't Thanos, it was LinkedIn. And he just got completely disintegrated. Now, this is a guy who I think deserves the Nobel Prize for his invention of the mRNA vaccine. And by the way, a lot of people say, oh, he didn't invent the mRNA. To check the New York Times. Well, the New York Times was wrong, right? So if you actually check the facts, you will find out that Robert Malone invented the mRNA vaccine 10 years before the person that the New York Times.
And I want to make a comment here. As much as there are many points of Malone that I don't agree with, still, this I find strange that these companies, LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, they are on their own, whatever their criterias are, bringing the content down, bringing the accounts down. For me, my personal experience, the funniest one that I looked at it and I laughed was Facebook. So I did a video debunking one of the some Nobel laureate talking about something which I thought was wrong, and I debunked it. And Facebook blocked my video saying fake news when they thought their fact checkers were actually just looking at the name of the person that I was talking about. They blocked my video, and if I was fake news, then that person was actually correct. And they actually do not even have that wisdom to understand what to do or what not to do. So my question to you is the following, and I think we are inevitably now shifting towards the censorship as well. My question, two things. I asked this from Dr. Paul Marik this morning as well. Isn't this a damage that 100 years later, when historians, when students of journalism, when they look back at this time, and they'll take a microscope and they'll look at the fingerprint of the society at this time, and they'll say, were there people who were trying to help humanity at this time? Their records, their content, their activity would have been erased. Who would know if, let's say, Malone's LinkedIn is gone, his work is gone, his opinions are gone, his position is gone? Who would know what was the position, and who would know that there was somebody who was trying to help? Isn't that a huge damage?
Oh, no, there's no question about it. It's unquestionably, it's un-American. It used to be that we had the town square that we would be able to speak freely in, and we would have common carriers that were regulated by the government, that I can make a phone call to someone, or I can mail a letter to someone, and those are all regulated and those are protected communications. But things have changed. So now we have email providers who provide the same service, but they're not regulated by the government. They're private companies. And so I sent an email to my friends saying, hey, clinical trial confirms that fluvoxamine works. And my email was censored. My private email to my contacts was censored by SendGrid.
Really?
And
SendGrid?
SendGrid.
The sending engine itself?
Yes. Well, the company.
Yeah.
After I sent out the email, somebody reviewed the email and decided it was inappropriate, and they didn't want me on their platform anymore. So they disabled all the links in the email, because all the links then are, rewritten to go through their system, so that people couldn't get to the information. And I couldn't get into my account. All my contacts that I had uploaded were gone. The unsubscribes list were gone. And they said that they said, sorry, there's no way to recover it once it's been removed. And of course, we didn't notify you. And we didn't even ask you if you had a scientific basis or as a defense. It's basically shoot first, and that's it. It's basically shoot first and then see you later. This is how I was treated at SendGrid.
So I have a very interesting observation here, and I'll give you an example of why my observation is this way. I think that even this censorship at this time is proportional to the audacity of the person and their voice. And I'll give you an example. I have 2 YouTube channels. One is a smaller channel, and this channel is a little larger. On this channel, my ivermectin talks were taken down, and I received that one day, 54 videos. Dr. Paul Marik's talk went down. My talks went down. Some other guests who had talked about COVID went down. And I received an email saying, we did a manual review and we feel that your content is not correct, right? In the same time, I have a smaller channel which has a even smaller voice. My voice is small, but even smaller voice. Over there, I have videos with ivermectin. I don't want to tell them that so they don't go finding it. I received an email for ivermectin, mechanism of action, same thing, saying we have done a manual review and we think this is suitable for all advertisers. Same video. So that told me that it is really the impact of the voice that they are assessing, and based on that they are stopping and silencing. So my emails have never been silenced, but your emails are silenced as well. Maybe they felt that your impact is even greater. Do you feel that the censorship is actually proportional to the audacity?
I think it's just the censors are looking at what the guidelines are, and if you violate the guidelines, they take you down. So,
got it. So I'm gonna ask a question.
Maybe if you're more audacious and you get more views, then you get prioritized, right? Because if you're a censor, you've got all this material, to censor. And you're going to go for the ones with the most views first, right? Because then you minimize the damage that is done for people who are speaking out against whatever the policy is. So, so our medical community, is basically gated by what do the censors at YouTube think? So your medical advice that you're getting, maybe the YouTube censors should just do their medical advice directly, because that would actually save us a lot of time, because, a lot of people do a lot of work to create these YouTube videos. And then they're like surprised when they're taken down. And of course, they're never given a reason for taking it down. They said, well, it violates our guidelines. Well, can you what violate? What did we do that? We mentioned the I word. So it's pretty sad. And and then of course you go through this appeal process, and it's like talking to a wall, right? Because I could tell you, I say, oh yeah, I got 50 papers that support this. No, we're denying your appeal, right? And you're like this captive audience, and you have no rights. And so my suggestion, my sort of innovative solution for this, because I'm an entrepreneur, I like to think of innovative solutions, is wouldn't it be great for these large platforms that we use now for communication, which are essentially the replacement for common carriers? Why not have a process where I can say, look, I bet $25,000 that I'm right. And if you disagree with me, that's fine. We'll go to a mediator. And if I win, I get the $25,000. And if you win, you get my $25,000. So the point is that so it's a way to show that you're pretty confident in what you're saying. So if I said, hey, I think my video on the I word, I think if I went to the judge, that the facts back me up, and so I'm going to put $1 million on this. Now, this is interesting because it's a great way to make a lot of money really fast when you're right. And so, I think it's totally fair too, right? Because they can. Yes. What do you think of that idea?
I love this idea. I think we'll create a small pool of money. We'll put that money towards the content generators, and they can now start going and saying, here is some money, let's figure it out, and you take the money if we are wrong, and if we're right, you add to this pool. Yeah. I love it.
I mean, yeah, for honest content generators, it's a from the company's point of view, you could say, hey, look, this is a revenue stream for you because of course your censors are always correct. Yes. And they will then find out that their censors, when given to an unbiased mediator, are incorrect. And so I think that if we had this system, that anytime people bet $10,000, the company would just say, okay, decline, we'll restore you. Right?
I love this idea. It's totally creative. It involves the money, which actually speaks louder than the words. And I think if they're right, they can earn it. So I have another observation. This video right now, and this has been happening for some time. What will happen is right now we are broadcasting live on YouTube, 2 Facebook channels, Twitter, Periscope, and Twitch. After this video is done, the first platform that would stop this video is Twitter. They would just stop it. It would say broadcast not available. The second platform that would censor it is going to be Facebook. Facebook would not take it down, but they would not let you share it. Or if you shared it, they would say you are doing something wrong. This is fake news. This should not be shared. YouTube still would let this go on for some more time. I might not be able to monetize it, or might be taken down. It depends.
I tell you, I must be on some like YouTube list, because when I post a video, like I have subscribers on my channel, and I posted like one video, and it went up for, I don't know, 30 minutes. I had 90 views. Done. Gone. Wow. Strike against the channel.
Gone. So I think that even these channels themselves do not have a standard. For example, when we talk about press, printed press in the past, these standards were regulated. There were regulations to say, here are the standards that you all should uphold to. Here we have Twitter that would take it down as soon as it is finished. Facebook would not let it share, and then YouTube would let it play for some time. And if YouTube felt that, hey, we are not feeling that great today, they'll take it down. What is this? Should this not be regulated?
Absolutely. Right.
And why is that not happening?
The thing I talked to you about, about putting up the bounty, and I think you have to have a minimum threshold, right? Because to go to mediation, it's got to be $1,000 or, just something to make it economically viable. And then, there'll be probably online mediation services that, have retired judges that resolve these disputes. And, each side is given 30 minutes to do it, and you're done in an hour. It can be pretty efficient to resolve these. But I think that once these companies realize that, wow, they're spending a lot of money if they're not right, because truth should never be censored, right? Why would we be censoring truth? I mean, like, what kind of society censors truth?
So let me be a devil's advocate for a second. How do I, let's say I'm YouTube, how do I know that this is truth? For me, this is incorrect. How do I know it is truth?
Well, you got to be pretty careful. I mean, the whole point is that right now there's this this level where they say, hey, look, it doesn't matter if we goof up. We can take the baby out with the bathwater here. So we'll just censor a lot of stuff. And yeah, a lot of stuff will get taken out, but at least we won't be, leaving any bad stuff. And so they raise the level, and they take out a lot of good stuff, and they take out the bad stuff.
Got it.
So I think it means that they need to be more clever, and they need to have, instead of one censor, it goes, hey, if I want to censor this, then it goes to the next one who says, yeah, and the other thing is that the censors then get held accountable, right? Because if one censor or two censors or three censors are losing the company a lot of money, something's going to happen, right? So that's why I think the having this thing is for this economic makes a lot of sense, right? Because now companies actually have a motivation.
They do.
Make sure that they're doing the right job, because otherwise they're going to lose a lot of money, and
Correct.
that's going to change behaviors. Because the way it's working now is like, man, you don't have a leg to stand on. Robert Malone, inventor of the mRNA vaccine, gone. Hey, no, I got no LinkedIn, no problem. It's in my terms of service. I can revoke service anytime that I think that you've violated my policies. If I don't like you, you could say, hey, Black Lives Matter. And LinkedIn could say, well, I don't like that. You're gone.
So if I shift gears a little bit, we have Cool Bean community right now here as well. They love you. They listen to you on other platforms as well. Or if your talks remain up, they listen to those talks as well. So there's a condition provided they're up. So we have some questions for you as well here. So Cool Beans, please, if you had written a question before, it has scrolled up, it is gone. So please rewrite it. Meanwhile, I'm going to start with some questions that are here. So here we have, I just had my mouse cursor on a question which just scrolled away. So let's start from William. William is a Cool Bean for many, many months. He is a healthcare professional as well. So I have developed such an engagement with the Cool Beans that I know who's doing what majority of the time. So just curious, are there any plans for a bigger trial with more people for fluvoxamine, as to silence the critics who will say the trial was too small?
Yes. And so that trial was halted, though, midway. They had an interim analysis. They halted the trial. And they halted the trial because the trial was accruing patients too slowly and would never finish. And there wasn't enough of an effect size that the trial would have to go on for years, and with a declining base. So they decided to halt the trial and expose the results. Well, that was a long time ago. I don't even remember when it was. And I keep asking, okay, so, what's the data? Can we at least release the data and so forth? No, they're still analyzing it. So I've heard rumors that the effect size may be 30%. And I know it was 100% in the previous trial. So what accounts for the difference? They gave the drug late, right? So like I said, you give the drug early. As soon as for any, and it doesn't matter, fluvoxamine, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, whatever it is, whatever the protocol is. And like for George Fareed and Brian Tyson have a wonderful protocol. It's pretty complex. There's a lot of drugs in it, but they've given it to like 4,300 patients early. and the hospitalization rate is 1 out
Wow.
of 4,300 patients.
That's impressive.
And there were 0 deaths. So we actually have, and that trial, because you can look at what happened to the patients in the other clinics next door, same area, same average age group, all that stuff. You can look at what happened there, and you will find that, yeah, these guys, this protocol really works. It's kind of like, yeah, it wasn't a clinical trial, but you can tell it's the same neighborhood, it's the same population. Some of the patients went over here, the other patients went over there. These guys have no hospitalization. These guys, hospitalization through the roof. And you don't need a clinical trial on that one. But of course, it's not a double-blind randomized controlled trial that was approved by an IRB. And so therefore, no physician in the world will ever consider that to be interesting or valid. And, that's the shame with today's evidence-based medicine, in that they believe that only randomized controlled trials is the only thing that has data. And so if you show 2 doctors in the same neighborhood, one doctor is getting a 0% hospitalization rate, the other one has 12% hospitalization rate, people would say, well, that doesn't show anything. That's just anecdotal.
Got
That's
it.
how it works.
Got it. Thank you. Next question, Luis Grande. And I'm going to leave this question here and ask you a question of my own as well. And I'm leaving it here, otherwise it would scroll up and I would lose it. So my question first. Sorry, Luis, don't mind. Question about if you were given a chance, you've done the work with your team, you've looked at various drugs. If you were given a chance today, and I asked this question from Dr. Paul Merrick this morning as well, and we said, tell us, what should we do that the pandemic becomes a nuisance or goes away? Do you feel that you and your team found something that you could say, do this and we will be out of this pandemic?
Oh yeah, no, look, it's like a Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz, like she always had the way to get back to Kansas because she could just click her heels 3 times. So she had the magic, the ruby red slippers, and she had it the whole time. Well, here we've had it the whole time. Fluvoxamine, ivermectin, NAC, vitamin D, inhaled budesonide. These things have been known for, been on the shelf the whole time, and people are afraid to use them because they might work. Anyone who uses these drugs finds, holy they work. Like, nobody goes back. You can't find a physician who uses ivermectin and fluvoxamine. They use ivermectin first because they've heard about it. Then they add fluvoxamine and say, wow, this is like really great. We're getting much better results. And, then they add inhaled budesonide and, they add these things and they get better results. And you don't see anybody who goes back and says, oh, doesn't work at all. The physician next door is doing nothing and he's getting better results. You never see that, ever.
Got it. So we have a.
So we've always had the way to end the pandemic, but the physicians are afraid to use it. We knew back in late last year that these drug combos were extremely effective, and nobody cared. That George Fareed got 4,300 patients with 1 hospitalization. Nobody from the NIH would even send him an email saying, hey, we'd like to check out just to make sure there wasn't a bias or confounder, and because this looks really good. Like, nobody cares when you save lives. It's all about whether big drug companies can profit from drugs. It's not about saving lives. And if you look at the NIH guidelines, there's no criteria that says, yeah, if we approved ivermectin and we told physicians to use ivermectin, then here's how many lives we could save if the drug in fact works as expected. And if it doesn't, no harm done. So, why wouldn't you? Of course, there's no reason that you would always save more lives by going with the drug, because ivermectin doesn't kill anyone. Even if you overdose it, it doesn't kill anyone. It's not like hydroxychloroquine. So it's a super safe drug. it makes no sense. So to answer your question, we've always had the solution, but NIH, Cliff Lane, and Anthony Fauci, they want to push a different agenda.
Agreed. And that is what bothers me a lot. That I actually think that the treatment regime that you spoke, some more vitamins, some more things here and there, we actually can get ahead of this thing within a month. We can be done with it. We can say open up the society.
It's almost like, why don't we pause the vaccine for a month and let's give the repurposed drugs a try. Let's educate everybody on what happened with Fareed and Tyson, because they've got the best track record in the world, and let's give that a try, or let's just do it in one state or one small country, and see what happens. I think people would be amazed, because actually getting COVID and treating it early means you get natural immunity, which is broader and more robust, and so we won't have variants, and we won't have to keep getting vaccinated. So it's cheap. And plus the risk is reduced because your chance of getting COVID is really small right now. So it's like we minimize everything by going with repurposed drugs.
Totally agreed. Thank you very much for that. So, Luis Grande, this was a question. We have seen some doctors hesitant to prescribe fluvoxamine. Can another SSRI be substituted in suboptimal circumstances?
Yes. Well, it turns out that it's not suboptimal, right? So you can use fluoxetine instead of fluvoxamine. It's slightly different. So that's called Prozac. The standard name is Prozac. And you'd use 30 milligrams once a day rather than 50 milligrams twice a day, because they're different drugs. It turns out the stats on Prozac are actually better than the stats on fluvoxamine, slightly, in observational studies. We got a lot more data because Prozac was marketed very successfully. And so the market share is much larger for Prozac, so we have more data on it. But what the data shows in observational studies is that it tends to have a larger effect, a larger protective effect than fluvoxamine. So if you can get your hands on some Prozac, which is pretty easy to get, if you happen to be depressed that you got COVID and your doctor doesn't want to prescribe it for COVID, you can say, Doc, I'm really depressed. I got COVID. I leave work, whatever. Hey, they can on label give you Prozac, and you'll not only be less depressed, but you'll also be a lot less depressed because you won't feel so bad.
Got it. And I want to make sure that the community here, the listeners, the viewers, the Cool Beans already know this, but anyone who's new, please, these are educational, informational talks. These are not prescriptions for anyone. So please, if you're watching in a country where you can go get those things and self-medicate, please don't do it without talking with a doctor. This is an important aspect at this time for COVID, to bring in as much information to people, physicians, healthcare workers as possible. So continuing with the questions, there's a question for Bean. That is the name of the Cool Bean. I have a question. What is your advice for any tech startup now? So very different from COVID question. I think you're a serial entrepreneur. Do you have any advice?
Well, I think maybe the key word is now. I'm not sure that I could really give people. I think, look, that we're in this interesting position right now, which is strange because we don't know whether it's going to go pop this way or we're going to go pop back into virtual land where we're not going to be in person. So I think that if I was a tech entrepreneur now, I would do something that worked if it went this way or it went that way, because the future is always hard to predict. And so if you're creating something that assumes we're going to go zig and we instead zag, then you could be in trouble. So I would look for something that is sort of an all-weather venture. Would be.
Got it. Thank you. Next question, JLB. What are the risks into taking fluvoxamine, and what movement symptoms to start it with?
So the risks are really low because if you take 50 milligrams twice a day, which is what you would take if you started right when you have symptoms. So if you, the best thing to do is to get the prescription from your doctor before you get COVID. And so you want to get the ivermectin prescription and all, and you'll find that the ivermectin prescription is difficult to fill. If we were in a third world country, ivermectin would be easy to fill, but we're in the United States of America. And if you're in Canada, of course, it's impossible to find ivermectin. If you're in the United States of America, you will find that there are various drug companies, drug stores that do not fill it. You will find that pharmacists can refuse to fill it. So then you go to you could go to a different pharmacy of the same store brand, and you'll find that you can get filled, because pharmacists are allowed not to fill have the right not to fill a prescription. So the best thing to do to avoid all of that is to get the prescription for COVID in advance, and then have it available so that when you need it, you can take it. So the question is, what were the side effects? So the side effects for fluvoxamine are, because fluvoxamine goes up to 300 milligrams a day is what the FDA says is the max. And we're basically doing it at 100 milligrams a day. So it's 1/3 the dose. So we're looking at a really low side effect profile. So maybe 1% or 2% say that they have a stomach upset. Some people become more nervous, feel like, it makes me more jittery, whatever. You don't want to take any coffee if you're on fluvoxamine, because it'll amplify the effect, and the coffee will last for, more than 24 hours. So be careful with coffee when you're taking fluvoxamine. But generally, the side effects are mild, and you don't even know that you're taking it. In my case, I'm taking it now because I was vaccinated, and I seem to have some symptoms that are similar to COVID, and so I can tell you that I don't know. I couldn't tell. I couldn't mentally. I feel the same. Maybe I don't interrupt people as often as I did but I think that's more because I got the training on Brett's video. But no, I can't tell. I can't tell a difference, and I don't think anyone else can tell a difference.
Got it. Thank you. Bilal, New Jersey says, any success with fluvoxamine with post-vaccine long haulers, brain fog, headaches? If yes, for how long it should be given if there is a side effect of suicide?
Yeah. So fluvoxamine is one of the 4 drugs typically given by if you go to covidlonghaulers.com and register for the cytokine test, it's like a 14 cytokine panel. And then they'll tell you, oh, you should take fluvoxamine, you should take ivermectin, and there are 2 other drugs. I'll send you the URLs for what they give you that you can post to this after the talk. And if you take those drugs, then you get rid of your long haul. And sometimes it could take a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. But usually people get back to like 90% of where they were, depending on, how they've been damaged from COVID or from the vaccine. So yes, they are successful. And somebody asked about the suicide. So these drugs don't make you want to kill yourself. The way these drugs work is they make you happier. And see, if you're really depressed, you're too depressed to take action on your thoughts to kill yourself. And what happens is that if you're like really depressed and suicidal, you don't end up killing yourself because you're too depressed to kill yourself. So what happens is when people then take an antidepressant, now they feel better and they can actually execute on their plan to kill themselves. And that's why people who have a suicidal tendency the doctor shouldn't be giving them fluvoxamine because it will make them happier so they can, carry out, because otherwise they were too depressed to even kill themselves. So, I mean, that's the, so if you're a normal person, taking these drugs does not make you suicidal, but sort of people believed, there were more suicides because it enabled you to take action. But that's the rationale behind these drugs.
And I would continue to give the disclaimer that this is not a prescription for any single person. This is an informational and educational video. We have been talking about fluvoxamine before as well. It is in the books as well. Side effects are there. Just ask your doctor. A question from Bangladesh, Samina Chaudhary. She is an MD as well. Can we use fluvoxamine in pregnancy?
Yeah, it's not contradicted at all in pregnancy. It's one of these things that it's not extensively studied, but there's nothing that would indicate that this would be a problem. And in fact, I would argue strongly that if you have COVID, please take the fluvoxamine. And the reason for it is that the COVID itself is going to get into the baby, and that the fluvoxamine will calm the inflammation in the baby. And so this is something that's really, really important to do. So just like you would normally take fluvoxamine, the question is, how is this going to affect your child? Well, this is a drug that's going to help the child rather than hurt the child. So, again, that not medical advice, that's just my opinion, but that's the rationale for it. And in fact, fluvoxamine has been given to young kids, and the doctors, so the kids are on the antidepressants for antidepressant reasons. And the doctor, some doctor wrote me and say, I gave, this young boy, he was on Luvox, and he got COVID and he recovered like really, really fast. Never seen anything like it. And then she got the connection that it was the Luvox that caused the child to
respond faster
so quickly.
Awesome. So Rima is a healthcare professional as well. For Prozac, what period of time do you take the 30 milligrams per day?
You mean like, do you take it in the morning or the evening?
And how many days?
So generally the fluvoxamine and the Prozac would be taken for 14 days because that's the length of the time of the inflammatory phase. So it's kind of like, it's really, really important in the first 7 days. And then it's kind of like insurance policy for the last 7 days, so that any chance of inflammation, you're just, treating. I mean, you could probably even go down, the last 7 days if you wanted to. But the point is to treat it throughout that inflammatory stage. Your immune system is now, fighting away the virus that's there and killing it, and there's still going to be some inflammation there. So it's good to have that there the whole time. And by the way, in India they use steroids a lot, and that's a big mistake, right? They use steroids to calm down the inflammation, right? Because it's anti-inflammatory, but that ends up being a mistake because the steroids affect your ability to fight the virus. And the beauty of fluvoxamine is that it calms down the inflammation without affecting your ability to fight the virus. And so this is why fluvoxamine is a much, much better drug for treating COVID than something like a steroid.
Got it. And I just want to show a couple of comments. One comment is contrary to the discussion we are doing. I just want to have folks see the opposing view as well. So Jill Hedower says, I'm sorry, it is not a very low side effect profile. There are major anticholinergic effects. Perhaps you are very lucky, Mr. Kirsch. This is not what MDs who treat numerous patients with fluvoxamine find.
Yeah, no, you actually, if you look at the clinical trial, you will find that the people who got fluvoxamine are in way, way, way better shape in terms of adverse events and so forth than the people who took the placebo. And so this is not a case where, if you look up fluvoxamine in the the doctor, any reference material that says, oh, it causes this and it causes that, and it causes this, it causes that, that's the 300 milligrams a day times 6 months kind of thing. So we're talking 50 milligrams twice a day for 14 days. It's a really low dose for a very short amount of time. And I have not seen anybody have any, like in Seftel's trial, of the patients that got it, there was like nobody.
Got it. And the way, Jill, I would add further is that please make your best judgment. Here is a message that fluvoxamine, there is something there. Now, when to give it, how much to give it, can the patient take it or not, what is their psychiatric health, what is their psychiatric history, that all needs to be checked. This is why these drugs are not for auto medication. These are not prescriptions from here either. This is an indication that, hey, there is a trial done, there is a benefit seen, and now there are doctors who can then take it and decide what to do further from it. Continuing on, there is another comment I wanted to show. Hemi is from UK. Dr. Bean, hospital yesterday with 2 lumps in my throat. I got a young doctor who knew about you and most of your guests, gave me great confidence in him and my future surgery. I got a high five. So Hemi, good luck for your surgery. I hope you recover fully, and very good to know that people knew about our talks. So I'm gonna just a few more questions, and then we will wrap up. I know it is late and we are more than an hour. So 1x2 says, I've heard Oxford UK are going to start an ivermectin trial, but the ivermectin will be given 3 weeks after infection kicks in. Or I was actually discussing that this morning with Dr. Paul Merrick as well. What they've said is, they said from the day of the symptom up to 14 days, you are eligible. If you get the symptom today and then up to 14 days, you can become participant in the trial. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, that's a if they don't stratify it for when you got the drug after symptoms, then it will be a disaster. Now, the only thing this will show, which we already know, I mean, it's silly to do that trial, right? Because we already know that you give it on day 4, you got to give a lot of drug on day 4. You give it on day 5, you got to give much more drug, and you give it on day 6, you better start with a much higher level. And so the point is that, and of course these guys don't do it. What they do is they come in 6 days, I'll give you the same doses as if you came in on day 1. Look, you don't have to talk to very many doctors to figure that one out. They learn pretty fast that the guys who show up late after they've been infected, they got to start with like, shit, we're really going to pump you up on drugs here because you got here really, really late. It's a little bit like, you can think of the inflammation as a fire. If you catch it when it's really, really early and it's really, really small, it takes a little glass of water to put it out. You wait 4 days. It's like this, big, humongous fire. You're going to have to like put a lot of drugs in it to tamp down the fire. And so it doesn't make any sense. And, it's like, what are these guys thinking? I would love to, have on your show here, I'd like to have a discussion with like, what are these researchers thinking that they would ever consider doing that? That just makes no sense whatsoever. What are they trying to prove? Because the whole thing should be, let's get people the drugs ahead of time. So as soon as they have first symptoms, like that's what they do in Mexico. They say, oh, don't wait for your PCR test. If you feel like you have these COVID symptoms that are different, treat it with the drugs. We'll give you the kit in advance so you can start the treatment immediately, because almost no matter what, whatever drug combo you're using, if you treat it early, you're going to get much better results. And also you'll have no long haul COVID, right? Because you never got the inflammation that caused the damage because you treated it early. And it's only when people wait that they have the damage, and that's the long haul COVID that then has to repair. And you get it too late and you'll never put Humpty Dumpty back together again, no matter how hard you try. It's like once the World Trade Center has burned down, it ain't coming back the same way. And so you really got to get it really, really early. And if you get early treatment, nobody ends up with long haul COVID.
Totally agreed. And I want to just add one comment here as well. There is a study in Malaysia as well for ivermectin, which I saw many folks on Twitter celebrating. But that study is also a study. I already told them that here is what they would come back with. The study is about usage of ivermectin in ICU and critical patients. That is not where ivermectin would shine as it shines in prophylaxis and early treatment. So these studies are either folks are not aware of how to use this drug, or these are studies that would come back with a failure of the medicine.
Yeah, the ivermectin, I think it's an anti-inflammatory. Just like fluvoxamine too works in the ICU. I mean, we've had people in the ICU, they get fluvoxamine and their CRP drops like a rock. And then they stop the fluvoxamine and the CRP skyrockets and they die. So there's cause and effect that you can very easily see in the ICU. But so that'll be true for any anti-inflammatory. So ivermectin, should work well, but of course it works much, much better, when you get it there early than when you get it there late. It's it's like what's the drug from Gilead? That. Dang, I'm blanking on it. Gilead's drug. What?
COVID drug?
Yeah. Gilead's COVID drug.
Remdesivir.
Thank you. Hasn't been top of mind for a long time. It's like remdesivir. I mean, remdesivir is silly to give late. It's an antiviral. Why would you give an antiviral to someone who's hospitalized? I mean, that makes no sense. That is like throwing a life preserver to somebody who is already 20 feet underwater and expecting to save their life.
Got it. So, Steve, there are so many questions that are still there. I think we would invite you once more. So for today, thank you so much for coming in. Any comments, any advice from your trials that you and your team have done? What is next there? And then after that, we will close. Please tell us, what is your next plan with the trials?
We're going to do a trial in Nepal where we're going to test 4 drugs that were recommended by Dr. Bruce Patterson, who runs the COVIDlonghaulers.com. By the way, if you have long haul COVID, or if you have long haul symptoms from the vaccine, go to COVIDlonghaulers.com and you can get tested and you can see where you rank, and then they'll tell you what drugs to take. So I have no connection with them. I just think they're the best in the world at doing what they're doing, and they treat both kinds of long haul patients. But so I went to Bruce and I asked him, so what treatment have you guys discovered for COVID long haul? Because the same treatments that work for COVID will work for COVID long haul and so forth, because it's treating essentially the same thing. And so he gave me a list of 4 drugs. So we're going to Nepal to because they have a lot of patients there, that and also the prices are a little bit less expensive. So we're going to invest in a trial there of 4 drugs that would be given to patients in a double-blind randomized controlled trial to prove that the 4-drug combination, I hope, will create 100% success in terms of no hospitalizations, or everybody gets well very quickly.
Got it. So thank you very much for your time, for your insights, and for discussing the trial and its results. And thank you from all Cool Beans as well.
Thank you.
Cool Beans, thank you very much for your time. So I would now see you tomorrow. Today we'll close here, and we'll see each other tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.